The superpower that every citizen has is the ability to control where they spend their time, money, and attention. By focusing these on supporting local businesses, you are having a profound impact on your friends, your family, and your local community. So if you want to change the world, you can start with buying local.
Welcome everyone to Buying Local, Glens Falls and Saratoga. We're actually doing a little double dip on this episode to put it out on both markets. Kind of a special episode today. I've been trying for a few weeks here to put together and really want to thank our guests for coming in and helping us talk about the new heat pump laws. That's the subject that we're going to be talking about. Heat pump installations, the requirements that are changing, kind of getting some of the viewpoints of Joe Cerrone from Cerrone Plumbing and Heating. Thanks, Joe, for coming in.
Absolutely.
And Andy Liporace, who owns Blue Flame. And they are now you're a natural gas supplier, right?
No, we are propane only.
Propane only, okay. Or natural, I said natural gas. I meant propane, sorry.
That's fine.
That's one of the silly things that I'll say during the episode. All right, yeah, close enough, right? So wanted to bring you guys both in and kind of talk about this new law, and I don't want to call it Hochul's law, but it is something that she's really pushed as far as the new green energy initiatives that we have in New York State and across the country. And so I'm going to kind of give you my quick understanding of the law itself, and please tell me where I go astray here. So my understanding is that 2024 or maybe 2025. Yeah, that's again when I was reading it. Go ahead and jump in there, Andy.
It's still rumored. She's scheduled to pass her budget at the end of this month, which will dictate whether it makes it in or whether the legislators push it out till 28 or 30.
Interesting.
Is what some of the speak about it is.
That was when I was doing some research, getting ready for the episode. That was one thing I couldn't really nail down. Some sources said 2024, others said 2025, and that's just for the first part of it, which basically, if I understand correctly, requires any new construction, residential construction. I don't know if this applies to commercial or not.
I thought it was just for multifamilies to start and then trickle down into single.
Yep. So I heard that residential homes, they wouldn't be putting natural gas meters in anymore, and they'd be pushing more towards electric.
Yeah, what I read was single family to multifamily up to 3 units that they would be requiring heat pump installations. And again, depending on where you're reading the information from, and some of this is from NYSERDA, some of this is from New York State, and when and where you can find information is a bit on the sparse side as well. So, so my understanding is it's a two kind of part movement into this whole initiative. The first part being new construction only, new builds. And then the second part would be that as of 2030, or whenever they end up doing the second part of this law, is that you basically would not be able to get anything other than a heat pump in New York State. So when it came to like Joe repairing my furnace, he would not be able to do that after 2030. He would have to recommend that I put in a heat pump or go without heat.
Right. It's one or the other.
Yeah. So again, guys, I really appreciate you coming in to kind of give us your viewpoint of the whole situation, kind of educate our listeners, myself definitely. I have so many questions about this whole situation. So let's just get into it. So, we started talking before the show started, before I hit the record button, which I always do, and I never should do because all the good stuff comes out before you hit record. But one of the things that we were talking about was how this is going to affect the business owners that are in the gas business, whether, now, Andy, you said you're in propane, but then there's also, you got the men and women out there that own heating oil businesses. And so I'm just, kind of fill us in on how this is going to affect your business, if at all.
So as a whole, as New York writes this code in, it's going to start diminishing our gallons we can output, essentially, since a home will become more efficient, be more airtight, better insulation, better building codes. So overall, we'll start delivering less gallons to new homes, which we already see for the past 5 or 6 years.
And that's just because they're so efficient and the heating element, whatever they're using for heat is so efficient. I mean, it's...
Well, your insulation used to be R9. right? And now the building code for an attic or a roof is like R38.
Yeah.
That's just a massive change of insulation. So as they become tighter, the more efficient they are and the less gas they'll use. Which, we've been seeing for a decade.
You sure? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, going from heating oil to natural gas and propane and, it's bound to happen sooner or later, right? That homes are so efficient. And again, people, the consumer, I know myself, I like you, Andy, but I would like my propane bill to be smaller.
I would too if I were you. And I like you very much as a customer.
And for those of you listening, we live in an old farmhouse that is not well insulated and was built in the late 1700s, early 1800s. So we got a lot of drafts, and pretty much our furnaces run from mid to late October until about June, just to keep that place warm.
Which shows you how far along the building codes have come, where my average customer used to be 800 to 900 gallons for an average home, is now into the 5 to 6, barely a 700 gallons a year.
Yeah.
Account for just heat.
God, I wish that was the case.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a 1,000-gallon tank for the main house, and we fill that up 2 or 3 times. And then we've got 2, I think they're 80 gallons on the garage. 200. Oh, okay. And we fill those out. We fill those up like
quite a bit.
We had 2 like every month. I feel
about every 6 weeks.
Man, it's crazy. So it's a lot of propane anyway. And
for a single family residence, that's a massive amount.
Yeah. And so, to jump over to Joe on this, like we were talking, like, is a heat pump going to be able to sustain a home like mine?
Depends on the application. What we're seeing that in the newer homes, just because they are building them tighter and more efficient, it's more realistic for a heat pump to be able to take care of the heating load for, something that is more well insulated and airtight. Heat pumps have been out for a long time. For those of you who don't know what a heat pump is, it's basically an air conditioning system that works in reverse to create heat. It draws heat from the outside air to, basically heat your home. So the colder it gets outside, the less efficient a heat pump is gonna perform. So ductless heat pumps have been out for a long time, and they're getting more and more efficient. And now, we're seeing more and more manufacturers coming out with ducted heat pumps, so you can actually hook ductwork up to it, and, do basically a forced hot air heat pump, for your home. A standard house, typical, 1,200 to 1,800 square foot, they used to be able, they used to need like 80 to 100,000 BTUs just to heat the home, and now we're seeing it's more towards 50 and 60 thousand BTUs to heat the home, where it's in the reach of a heat pump. Basically what we do, a heating and cooling load on a house, and we try to see where if you need supplemental heat besides a heat pump. Most applications do, and it's kind of opening up a can of worms as far as, if you want to go all electric, that's great. We've just been running into situations that, you have a heat pump that will perform down to, 0 degrees, and then it'll start, losing a little bit of its capacity, and then you'll need supplemental heat to kick in. And, if you need electric resistance heaters, for that, we've been running into the application where, they don't have enough amperage in their breaker panels, to cover that. Yeah,
that was something we started to get into as well as, and I wanted, in a minute, we'll jump back to Andy because he was doing a great breakdown of the cost analysis of what it costs you to heat your home with propane versus what it's going to cost on electric. But that is so to kind of back up, right? When we're looking at installing these heat pumps, tell us what that, because I think you guys just went through some training for this, right?
So, So National Grid is offering a lot of rebates out right now. So they're, depending on how much of the home that we're, heating with the heat pump, they're offering anywhere from $500 to $5,000 in rebates right now, which is kind of crazy and something that we've never seen before.
Well, I mean, not to interrupt you or cut you off, but they got to be really excited about this law at National Grid. I mean, how much, just delivery fees alone based on what your electric usage is. I mean, they stand to make a disgusting amount of money from this law, and there's no competitor. Like, there's nobody else other than National Grid. Like,
they have a very good captive audience all the time.
All the time. All the time.
With built-in margin.
Yeah, I'm flabbergasted by this whole thing that we're essentially handing the entire state's ability to heat their homes, power their homes, everything over to one company. And there is not even a chance of any sort of competition whatsoever for someone to come in and be able, because National Grid owns the lines. They own the poles.
Even if there is competition, it's only coming in on the supply side.
Right.
Right? So you could choose your provider technically.
Sure.
But you have two bills, one from your supply company and one from National Grid.
Yeah.
Always. So your savings is maybe you can get a guaranteed rate for 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And then at any point in time, they can just change their delivery fees. So again, not to hijack what you're saying, Joe, but you're talking about the National Grid, and I just, again, so amazed by everything that this law is doing. And one of them is just handing the keys to the kingdom over to the National Grid folks. Like,
it's the removal of consumer choice.
Yeah.
It's what happens.
It is. So sorry, before I interrupted there, Joe.
What was I saying?
I know I'm all fired up now about National Grid.
Oh yeah, the rebates for National Grid. So they're offering, like I said, crazy rebates anywhere from $500 to $5,000, depending on how much the heat pump is heating, your home, and how much of the load it's taking care of. We're just running into situations where the heat pump, like I said, it just, as it gets colder, it gets less efficient. So, when it's super cold out, it can't really cover the whole load of the house. So you will need some sort of supplemental heat in most applications that we're looking at right now. Smaller rooms and smaller apartments, heat pump can carry the load and take care of it no problem without supplemental heat. It depends on how tight the house is and strictly the application.
So, I mean, I guess, I'm just, again, that as you say, you're going to need supplemental heat that's not electric driven. Or if it is electric, let's say you put extra space heaters or whatever it is.
So you could do electric baseboard heat for backup, or like if it's a ducted system, there's the option of putting electric resistance heaters as backup to the heat pump, and that actually works together with the heat pump. So they'll work, at the same time, and, that can, cover the load depending on, how much, how big of a panel you got and how much room you have in there, honestly.
So that's getting added to my list of questions that I have for the governor is we're being forced into a situation to install heating systems that will not cover the heat load for this part of the country. We often have below zero temperatures, sometimes for extended amounts of time in January and February. This year we were lucky, right, that we got a mild year, but essentially what's going to happen is you're going to have to pay for the installation, which will come back around on the cost of that. But we got to pay for the installation of the heat pump, and more than likely we'll have to install additional heating sources that are electrically driven according to the laws.
In some applications, yeah. Depending on the size, like,
right.
This room,
my farmhouse.
Yeah, your farmhouse is, that'd be tough to heat with a heat pump.
We're screwed.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could.
Yeah.
Or it would be so oversized to meet your load. It would be, your cost would be
a $50,000 heat pump.
Yeah. So like, you would need multiple heat pump systems to cover the load. You can cover the load. You'll need a lot of systems.
I'll need a lot of systems. So,
well, not only that, but you also have to, don't forget, most of these ratings that they tell you about, they're at 45 degrees, right?
Right.
So as you go, they will go to zero, but your BTU load that they can handle drops off significantly. Mm-hmm. So it's math.
Yep. So like I said, they're getting better and better. Like there's some heat pumps that, will heat down to -30 right now. Like they are getting better and better. And, say if it's, a, 40,000 BTU, unit, it'll, at negative 30, we're still seeing, that they're throwing off like still 85% of that. So they're still throwing off like, a good 30,000 BTUs. So it's not, they're not bad systems, and it's for certain applications, it's a smart move, I think.
So that's the thing, right? Is I oscillate back and forth between like, we want to be better for the environment. We want to do things that are good. But at the same time, like, is it, we talk about sustainability, like, is that sustainable for the Adirondacks? Is that sustainable for this northeastern United States?
So when we're doing a heating and cooling or a heating load, for a house, the design temperature that we have to, pull the load against is -2. That's that design temperature. So when we do a heating calculation for, a room or a house, we're, figuring -2, it's outside -2, and we do, an insulation value and everything, and we see how many BTUs that space needs, to properly heat it. And, sometimes, the heat pump can take care of it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Now, and so, Andy, I want to jump over to the cost comparison, the cost analysis, because I think this is important. And I think one of the big parts of this, and again, I say as I oscillate back and forth between this being a good thing and being a bad thing, one of the things I see outside of National Grid having the market cornered is that, or having a monopoly, realistically speaking, is the cost to not only put the systems in, which I understand they're not cheap, and I think it's great that National Grid is offering rebates, and I believe NYSERDA is going to be offering some rebates as well. Let's hope anyway. But the cost of the system is going to be thousands of dollars. From the research that I've done, you're not getting into a heat pump system for under $5,000, and really it's more like 8 or 10.
Yeah. Yeah, it can vary, but like I said, it depends on how much we're doing, because you can have up to $5,000 in rebates.
Right. And so that's great if your system only costs $5,000. But again, if you're a property like ours, where, we're a farm,
right?
We're looking at a system that's going to be north of $50,000 to be able to put that system in. Systems, I should say, because it's multiple systems.
For your house, yeah.
Yeah. You've been in my house plenty of times. Yeah, it's terrible. And so outside of the cost of insulation, though, let's talk about the cost of use. So, Andy, before we got started, you were doing a great comparison of talking about what your gas cost would be in a current market versus what the electric cost would be. Can you kind of give us that breakdown again?
Yeah, so what I was saying earlier was, for my average customer, if you take a 600-gallon home for propane use and you break it on a per BTU basis, right? So we're bringing it down because the 600 gallons equal X BTUs, which you need to heat your current existing home. A 1 gallon of propane is 91,500 BTUs. A kilowatt hour is approximately 3,100 BTUs, right? So it's raw math. So in 1 gallon of propane is 26 kilowatt hours. Okay. So if you take your 600 times your 91,500, it's 15 million BTUs, somewhere in there. And then divide it out by your kilowatt hours and you get a massive number, right? So we know today's cost of propane retail is around $3.29. So your average on one delivery, if you got all 600 gallons, is about $1,900. Now, if you take just the delivery or just the supply charge currently, which was on NYSERDA, which is around 22 cents per kilowatt hour, you're somewhere around $2,300 for the year. All in one lump sum, not your average, just all at once. So it's currently more expensive, plus there's no competitors for electricity.
Right. So it could get even more expensive.
Well, it will. As demand goes up, there are too many things that need to be changed currently in our electrical grid.
Oh, right, because our grid is not even set up to handle all of this.
No.
Is that fair?
From what I know, and I don't know much about the electric side.
Yeah.
That's not my specialty, but math is pretty good. I look at that.
Math is math, man.
Yeah. What I've been running into, with going back to the electrical issue is in these older houses that have like 150 amp panel coming into their house and they want to go all electric, the panels are too small, honestly. To do the heat pump and to have backup electric heat and go all electric. There's been several cases already where they just couldn't do it because they don't have enough room in their panel.
And we're adding another panel onto the property right now because our 200 amp panel is too small for the things that we have going on there. And I can tell you the cost to add a 200 amp panel is it's gross.
It's significant. Yeah.
So you look at just a simple, let's say at that house that's got that 150 amp panel, right? And so they're going to be putting in a heat pump system that's, let's just say it's $8,000, right? From all the numbers I read on as far as pricings for these things, that's a good,
depending on the application, yes.
Right,
Yep.
good number to use, right? So we've got an $8,000 heat pump. Now we've got, I'll be generous and say it's only going to cost them $3,000 for that panel, but I know the one that we're putting in is more than that. So let's just be generous though and say it's $3,000. Now they're at $11,000, which I don't know that there's any rebates for that panel installation.
Not that I know of.
Right. And then it's going to cost, what was the cost difference? Almost $1,000 between
per year.
Right. So just in year one, we've got, I'm not so great at the math, but that sounds like $12,000 or $13,000.
So how long? So are you going to stay there for 20 years?
Right.
Because when's your payback realistically? Which people always like to put.
Well, it doesn't sound like there is one.
Not unless you're there for 30 years. Maybe your kids will take it over.
My kids want nothing to do with the farm. So, I'm so confused by all of this. Because what I hear is that from a monetary standpoint, none of this policy is good for the consumer. Or am I wrong on that? Take the environment out of it. I'm just saying from a money standpoint, which right now we're in some, turbulent financial times.
So I would recommend any people that have to replace their air conditioning system or their air conditioning system goes, this year, I would put in a heat pump, keep your furnace, and then your heat pump, we can program it so the heat pump can take care of the load of your house. Mm-hmm. And then when there's a couple degree differential, we'll have the furnace kick in. Makes the most sense, right now because we're still installing more furnaces than heat pumps right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's the smart move. It's the hybrid. It's not all one way or all the other, right? If you want to add air conditioning, you want to take out that window unit, put in a mini split to add the heat pump side is maybe a couple $100.
Yeah.
If you were just doing AC only, you add the heat pump, it's fractions of what it would be just to do it if you were going to do the whole house. So that makes sense. Your propane bill comes down, your natural gas bill will come down, your electric bill creeps up slightly, but not enough to really probably notice.
Right, and then when that heat pump starts to get a little inefficient when it gets very cold out, it's going to shut off and your furnace is going to kick in.
And and another question I had from a monetary cost standpoint is, what will, let's say 10 years down the road, right? Because that's really what we're looking at right now. So 2025, we start to see this. It's really, like you said earlier, it's not really going to have a big impact on your business immediately, right? Because it's not going to affect propane usage more than we're already seeing naturally in the market, right? But 10 years down the road, let's just say when now we've got 60 or 70% of the homes on the market are now using heat pumps as opposed to using propane furnaces. What does that do? Obviously, like you said, there's still going to be uses for propane, right?
I don't think we'll see a high percentage in 10 years.
Okay.
Think about it.
Agreed.
The average number of homes you have, what's our new construction? The governor's trying to push 800,000 new in 5 years. We don't see that growth in New York. More people are leaving than coming in.
Yeah.
So
I think that's about the number of people actually that left New York State last year.
It was.
Yeah, 800,000.
So the new building is not that goal she's setting. It's nowhere near close to it.
Mm-hmm.
So in 10 years, the percent of new homes with this will be smaller than what we want to think it is.
Yeah.
Or the lofty goals they're projecting is not there. The growth's not there.
Yeah. Well, that's another. I keep seeing that they want to be at 70% renewables by 2030. So that's another interesting number. But
I mean, we're we do a lot of service, and we service systems that have been out there for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
That haven't broken yet, and why swap it out and replace it if it's still working? So, I don't see it happening right away, especially to existing houses, because all these houses are sized for furnaces, and
Sure.
they have furnaces in them right now, and that are going to be out there for another 20 years.
And what you need going forward, again, is the new building codes for efficiency.
mm-hmm.
Because you need that house to be tighter if you want to do it with electric. Because the older heat losses are too big that the heat pumps can't keep up
Mm-hmm.
at low temperatures when you want your heat.
Yeah.
So from a propane supply and demand standpoint, we're really not going to see any effects from this for a long time.
We've been seeing it for the past 5 to 8 years, right? More people are doing mini splits. They're going the hybrid route.
Mm-hmm.
So their demand is coming down as they make improvements to their house.
Okay.
So another 10 years, we'll see a little more drop off, but we'll still have some new users coming on.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not using as much propane, but we have a large share that's old. So our gallons will fall off, but not at a rapid rate that people want to say it's going to.
Mm-hmm.
I think in new construction, it's going to be a lot more rapid, because after a certain time, they're going to say no more natural gas meters.
Right.
And then everyone has to do heat pumps. There is a lot of new construction up here.
No more natural gas meters, but still propane usage, though.
You can do propane.
You can do propane.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see which way that's going to shift people, if they're going to, because again, I feel like, and I'm trying not to be biased on this, because I am, again, so on some sides, I think it's a great idea to be more environmentally friendly, moving away from fossil fuels when we can and when we're able to, so long as we have the technology, which again, I'm not sure that we do, to be able to move fully away from fossil fuels, especially in this part of the country where we get so cold. But
and also not to, I'm going to toot propane's horn, but we
Yeah.
are developing renewable propane. It's on the market. They can be bought. They are increasing capacity all over. So in 10 years, today I could sell renewable propane.
huh?
I could take a certain percentage of my gallons that I sell and bring a renewable to your home. If that's, so there are other aspects of renewable,
Mm-hmm.
even within the fossil fuel categories. So
It's
the whole
interesting.
push for electrification is interesting when you haven't exhausted a lot of your renewable stuff.
Mm-hmm. Renewable propane, I had not heard about that.
It should be a decent size of the market in 5 to 10 years.
Well, that's going to have to be a topic for a whole nother show. I'm going to have to do some research on that, man. So if you're someone that's listening to this show right now, I want to make sure that we leave our listeners with some good information as far as actionable items, right? So like if I'm a homeowner that has a furnace that is nearing end of life and I'm afraid of the heat pump situation or the cost of the heat pump situation, because that's really, I think, one of the biggest barriers right now for your normal human in New York State is going to be the cost, right? So if I'm worried about having to drop $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a heat pump system in the next 5 years, should I be doing something else sooner?
So, one thing that National Grid said in some of the trainings for the rebates is these rebates won't be available forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be mandatory at some point. So it's really application by application. It depends on the house, depends how old it is. And so I would say, we give free estimates. You can weigh it out both ways. We can factor in the rebate and see where you're at. But like going forward, like the simplest thing to do, especially if your air conditioning system breaks down and it needs to be replaced,
Mm-hmm.
you're putting, instead of putting an AC coil on your furnace, you put a heat pump coil to a heat pump, outdoor unit, and, you're headed in that direction. You get a nice rebate. And, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more expensive because of the rebates, even though the equipment is more expensive.
All right. So basically what you're saying, Joe, is give you a call and you'll help them make that decision, make the right decision.
Yeah, because we can, our estimates are free and we can weigh it out both ways for them and give them options, to see what best suits their needs, because every house is different and the system has to work with the existing ductwork, that you have in the house. So, it's application by application.
Okay. And again, is that something that people should wait or shouldn't wait on? Like, this is something they should start looking at now?
I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of deal. Like, if your system's working properly right now, I mean, it doesn't make sense just to swap it out for, because, the laws are changing in several years. So I would, if the system is nearing the end of its life, I'd say that'd be more of the of the people that need to step in that direction,
right?
Because systems last up to 20 years, so it could you could be stuck without being able to get parts for gas furnaces 20 years down the line. I'm not sure how that would go, but
okay, all right. And then Andy, with really curious about the renewable stuff, but I just never heard of renewable propane. Like, I know in my mind, I'm like, how do they do renewable propane? Like, what's someone, if someone is a propane buyer, right? Or if they have a system for propane, and any words of wisdom that you would give them as far as with the up and coming laws, or?
I really think it's individually tailored toward your home and your needs and what you want to do. A lot of it's finances.
Yeah.
So if it's going to be cheaper one way, everyone's going to look at that option. There's no great advice for you that I really have. Unfortunately, I would say keep using your propane, but when you start to get regulated out of it, it's hard to keep using something and like. So not great wisdom.
That's all right. Well, you've had plenty of great information so far. So
math is always your friend, right?
Right.
But does it work for you financially and economically, knowing what we know today?
Well, I think everyone loves the idea of being more environmentally responsible and being good stewards of the planet. But at the same time, like, it has to be doable. Like, there's a lot of families out there that are, having trouble making ends meet in the current environment that we are in and have been in. And then to sit there and turn around and say, oh, by the way, you need this big expensive system, and using this system is going to be, your costs are going to go up, but don't worry, it's good for the environment. I think that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Very much so.
So, guys, I really appreciate you coming on the show and helping to educate me, hopefully educating the listeners. I know I definitely taken a lot more away from this. I feel better, guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. And one more time, Joe, if people want to get a hold of Cerrone Plumbing and Heating, where can they find you guys?
Yeah, we're located out of Queensbury. They can always give us a call, and we'll get them a free estimate.
That's awesome. And obviously, you guys are a community partner with Glens Falls Today, which we greatly appreciate. Also, you've been a client for years and a friend, and you're also our HVAC and plumbing company. So they do a great job, everybody. So I'm not just saying that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Andy, who is also our propane supplier over at the house.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And if they want to get a hold of you, or they have questions, or they're looking for a new propane supplier,
the best way to reach us is probably on the web. We cover a great distance. We do Southern Vermont to almost Utica.
Wow.
So our website is blueflamegasco.com.
That's amazing. Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The superpower that every citizen has is the ability to control where they spend their time, money, and attention. By focusing these on supporting local businesses, you are having a profound impact on your friends, your family, and your local community. So if you want to change the world, you can start with buying local.